The additional problem we run into with inflation is when inflation is unanticipated, or when the inflation level is unanticipated from expectation. What this causes is this redistribution of wealth. And we'll go over two examples to kind of exemplify this redistribution of wealth. But essentially, contracts are written in nominal terms. They're written in, you make a fixed amount of money over the course of a year. Your raise is a fixed amount. It doesn't depend on, a lot of times, on what the inflation rate is. So same with like loans that are put in place. If you go out and get a mortgage, well, the mortgage rates, let's say mortgage rates are 3%. They're super low right now. Well, if mortgage rates are about at 3%, and inflation suddenly increases, well, if you have a fixed mortgage rate, your mortgage rate isn't going to change because inflation changed. So that's going to redistribute wealth between the borrower and the lender. So we're going to go over a couple examples that show that, to show how there's this redistribution of wealth. Because overall, one person will benefit and another person will be hurt. Overall, it should be pretty much a wash, but that still doesn't mean that there's not inefficiencies caused by unexpected inflation. Okay, so the first example is, let's say that I borrow $1,000 from my niece. It's a $1,000 loan for 1 year. The nominal interest rate that I'm going to pay, the interest rate that I'm going to pay on this $1,000 loan is going to be 10%, meaning that after a year, I repay the loan and the interest payment, where the repayment of the loan is $1,000 and the interest payment is $100, which means the total amount that I'm going to give to my niece Charlie in 1 year is $1,100. Okay. Over the course of that year, both Charlie and I expect inflation to be about 2%. Okay. Well, what happens if inflation is higher than that? Let's say it's 6%. Well, if inflation is higher than the anticipated 2%, then the $1,100 that Charlie is going to receive back in 1 year from the repayment of the loan is going to buy her less stuff. And the reason it's going to buy her less stuff is because the price level increasing, the repayment remaining the same, means that the amount of stuff that she can afford to buy has gone down. So look at, let's say, real buying or purchasing power. Well, what that essentially means is it's the dollar, or in this case, let's call it the repayment of the loan, divided by the price level. Okay, so what's the real buying power? Well, we got to take into account the price level. How do we do that? Well, we divide through the repayment by the price level. So in this case, she's going to get paid, Charlie's going to get paid $1,100 no matter what. The price level before we thought was going to be, that we thought the price level would rise 2%. Meaning if the price level was initially 1, now it's going up 2%, so the price level is going up to 1.02. Now I just used a random price level, but just to show you the 2% increase. As opposed to a 6% increase in inflation, or in the price level, what happens in that case? The repayment of the loan is still going to be $1,100. However, now inflation, the price level has increased. It's increased. It's not at 1.06 or 02. Now it's at 1.06. Why? Because the inflation rate is at 6%, which means the price level, just to note, price level has risen 6%. That's what we're saying by inflation being 6%. Okay? Here in blue, the price level has only risen 2%. Okay. So what's going to be greater? Well, 1100 divided by 1.02 is greater than 1100 divided by 1.06, which means the amount of stuff that Charlie can buy is less when the price level is greater. So this inflation being greater than she expected causes her to be able to buy less goods, and me, her Uncle Jimmy, not repaying the loan, I have to give up less goods when I repay the loan because the $1,100 that I'm repaying doesn't buy as much stuff when inflation is higher than anticipated. The reverse, the opposite is true when the price level increases less than expected, when inflation is lower than expected. So if inflation is lower than expected, well, the same thing holds. Just using now, inflation's only at 1%. Again, we thought it was going to be at 2%, but now it's only going to be at 1%. So what's her buying power? Well, the repayment, again, is still at $1,100. The inflation rate is only 1%. So now her buying power is greater than it previously was when the inflation was at 2%. Right? So she can buy more. She can buy more stuff, which means the repayment of the loan actually has more value, meaning that Charlie will gain some wealth. Charlie's relatively more wealthy, and her uncle is going to be less wealthy because the repayment of the loan cost me more goods that I could have purchased than previously anticipated. Okay? So again, this unanticipated inflation causes a redistribution of wealth that wasn't planned on when we decided on this nominal interest rate of 10%, when we decided on what the interest rate is going to be to repay the loan. Okay? Same thing is true when we look at contracts that are negotiated. Remember, just to keep in perspective, why do some lose and some gain from inflation, from unanticipated inflation? Because these contracts, in this case, in this loan agreement, the loan contract, and the next example, a wage contract, they're written in nominal terms. Okay, so in the second case, if we look at like a salary agreement, assume we have my nephew Kyle, and he has a job where he works hard, and so he wants to receive a wage increase. Him and his employer agree on a nominal wage increase of 5%, anticipating that inflation is going to be 3%. Okay, they both expect inflation to be 3%. They say they both agree. The employer and Kyle both agree that they want the nominal wage to be 5%. Therefore, Kyle will be able to buy 2% more stuff from his wage increase. Okay, accounting for inflation of 3%, Kyle will be able to buy 2% more stuff because his overall wage is increasing by 5%. Okay, so with the overall nominal wage increase being equal to the 3% for inflation and 2% for the real wage increase. Okay. Well, what happens if inflation ends up being less than expected inflation? We thought inflation was going to be 3%. Now inflation is 0%. Well, in that case, because prices are going to be relatively lower than anticipated, Kyle's wage is going to allow him to buy more goods than he anticipated. So in that case, Kyle is more wealthy because that increase in his wage of the nominal wage of 5% is entirely leading to an increase in purchasing power because there's no increase in prices. Okay, so it's like Kyle went from making $100,000 a year to $105,000 a year, and the price level stayed the same. Okay, so he's able to buy more stuff. In that case, Kyle's more wealthy, and the employer is paying him relatively more than they anticipated. Okay, the employer is relatively less wealthy. If the opposite happens, if inflation is greater than expected, let's say inflation ends up being 5%, well, in that case, Kyle's not going to be able to buy any more stuff, and his purchasing power isn't going to increase at all. Why? Because the nominal wage increase of 5% goes entirely towards paying higher prices in goods. Prices of goods have gone up by 5%. Kyle's wage is also gone up by 5%, meaning he can buy the exact same amount of stuff as he previously could. But when they negotiated the wage increase, the anticipation was for Kyle to be able to buy 2% more goods with his wage. Now, that's not happening because inflation is greater than was anticipated. So in this case, Kyle can buy less stuff, meaning he's less wealthy, but his employer is more wealthy. And so you may be thinking, well, that's a quote unquote bad thing. Yeah, for Kyle, he's less wealthy. But overall, that may actually be a good thing. It may be a good thing because with a little bit of inflation, if nominal wages stay fixed, then workers become relatively cheaper. So if we look at how we find the real wage rate, well, the real wage rate is, again, similar when we look at purchasing power. The real wage rate is the ratio between the nominal wage rate and the price level. So if nominal wages stay constant, let's say these stay constant, but the price level goes up, well, what's going to happen? Real wage is going to have to drop. And so, for the worker, this is bad. However, if workers become cheaper because the price level rises and nominal wages stay the same, this may actually stimulate the economy because firms may hire more workers. Workers have become relatively cheaper. So essentially, what's happening from our supply and demand, that's driving down marginal cost. Real wages of workers are driving down. So real wages decrease, meaning essentially marginal costs decrease. Well, what's going to happen? It's going to lead to an increase in supply. And if supply is increasing, this may lead to firms hiring more workers because the cost of workers has gone down because the real wage rate is going down. Right? So this actually may help stimulate the economy. Typically, price level is going to rise a little bit before wages. So that difference in increasing price level and wages that are still catching up, that's a little bit of grease to help kind of stimulate the economy and get the gears of the economy to run a little bit more smoothly. Okay. All right. That's it for this week. Next week, we'll start talking about how we can, grow that economy. We started taking a look at some of the variables now. Now we're going to talk about how we can actually model and grow the overall economy. Okay. All right. I'll talk to you soon. Have a good week.